Hi everyone, the partial prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so today I am going to do an update on my video, We Have Got to Be So Close. And actually, the last time I did it, I was talking about the 9th of Av. So I really thought something was going to happen on that day. But today I updated it to talk about 9/11 because that is my next high watch day. Okay, and so let's talk about 9/11 because a lot of significant stuff going on with 9/11. Okay, so if you remember in 9/11 2001, that was called, from People magazine, called it the day that shook America. So that was the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in New York City. Um, and I mean, you probably know what I'm talking about because that was a very big day in America. Um, and so that happened on 9/11 2001. And so now we actually have a terminology about 9/11. And it's interesting because those 9/11 connects to, you call 911 if you have an emergency. So definitely very interesting. So let's talk about, okay, so if you take 9/11 2001, if you take those numbers and add them all together, you end up with 5. So it's like 20 plus 3 equals 23 equals 5. Um, and so that's an interesting number because that connects to Judah. Um, okay, and then so 9 is interesting because 9, okay, so 9, it means good. The um, and then it also connects to 9 months of pregnancy. Okay, so definitely very significant. So kind of like a birthing. And what would have been the birthing on September 11th would have been the War on Terror. That was really the event that got America, to really think about the terrorist in the world. And then I want to talk about 6 verses 9. So I've heard so I think it was Rabbi Glazer who talked about this in one of his videos, where 9 would kind of be like the heavenly number and 6 would be like the earthly number. Because if you just look at the numbers itself, the loop on the 6 is below and the loop on the 9 is above. So that's interesting, especially when you think about 666 being connected to the beast from the earth. So that is interesting. And then, well, and so what's interesting when you have 9 with 9/11, what's interesting with that is that you had airplanes coming from the sky that hit the towers. Um, so definitely like a heavenly thing. I think we see kind of like this heavenly judgment. Um, and then what was interesting too was when the buildings fell, they rained, like it's interesting because in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when they were judged, it talks about God raining fire and brimstone from heaven. And so we definitely see connections of fire and brimstone, to 9/11. And so kind of there's this concept of heavenly judgment, the judgment raining down, falling down. So there was that. Okay, so then 11, I mean, I haven't really verified this, but I definitely think 11 means judgment. And with the Hebrew numbers, they only go up to 10 and then they start at, then it's, 11 would be 10 plus 1. So 10 connects to hand, because that connects to our 10 fingers. And then 1 connects to God because he's the one, And so, so 11 would mean like hand to God. So that definitely connects to judgment. Um, and then, okay, and then I'm going to talk about 19 because, okay, well, I'll talk about it and then I'll tell you why. Okay, so 19, I heard that it means gold. But then when you're doing the hand thing too, so, 9 being good. Let's see, did I do this right? Okay. Actually, I don't think I put that together right. Okay, so 9 um means good, and then the 1 would mean God. So it actually would mean, good God. Um so but I wrote good hand. Huh. So anyways, I guess I got that wrong. I don't remember where I came up with good hand. Um might have come up in my readings. Okay, but anyway, so the reason why I'm looking at 19, there's a bunch of reasons why I've been looking at 19 for a while to try to figure out what it means and stuff. And um, the thing that's hard about 19 is that if you search for it in the Bible, it doesn't show up a whole lot. I mean, sometimes you could actually like look up one of the numbers in the Bible and it's really clear what it means based on how it shows up in Scripture. But 19, I had trouble finding that. So what's very interesting this year is 9/11/2020 is going to be 19 years after 2001. Okay. Um and so one of the reasons, like to me, one of the reasons this is very significant is that if you understand the history of Israel, okay, so I've talked before about the nation of Israel, God's people, being made up of the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. And the southern kingdom would be what we call the Jewish people today. The northern kingdom would be the 10 lost tribes, which I believe are the Christians. Okay. And so God's people actually would be a group of people that are Jew and Gentile. Okay. And so when you look at Israel, um, in the Bible, it's helpful to understand that, to really see the full teaching that God has in His Bible. Because a lot of times when people look at prophecy and they read Israel, they think the Jewish people. And actually, it's really convenient for Christians to look at that because when it talks about judgment coming on Israel, it's easy for Christians to go, well, that's just the Jewish people. And then that's why they believe in a rapture instead of a judgment. Um, and but anyways, um so back, so this would actually be in what the Christians call the Old Testament and then what the Jews call the Tanakh. We read about the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, and we read about the falling of the southern kingdom and the falling of the northern kingdom, and when they were sent into exile. So that was a time when they were not following God and God allowed their kingdoms to fall. Okay. So what I believe is those are prophetic shadows of what's happening today. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. History just gets repeated over and over and over again. Um, and so we have today, kind of like a southern kingdom and northern kingdom. Um, and so the southern kingdom, back um, in the Tanakh fell 19 years after the northern kingdom. Okay, so if you think of like 9/11 being um, like we didn't in America, we didn't, I don't really think that's like the big day that we fell. Because, I would think I would pick other days, but um, it was definitely a day of judgment. Um, and, and really what I think it is that I think God was using 9/11 to, it's all part of, his plan is to bring together Jew and Gentile. And so, um, so basically what happened on 9/11 is that America, who up to that point has really kind of been, able to ignore terrorism, because, we never really seen it on our continent, I mean, sometimes like an embassy would get attacked or something like that, but we really were able to ignore it until 9/11. All of a sudden it was on our soil, and then all of a sudden it became a real thing. And so I think that's part of God drawing Jew and Gentile together. I mean, for me that was a big day in my life, um, to really just start thinking about terrorism and and now especially how I see the nation of Israel, um, just how much their daily lives are affected by terrorism. It was really helpful to learn about that. Um, So the southern kingdom fell 19 years after the northern kingdom. Okay, so 19 is very significant. Okay, so what if 9/11 2001 it was about the northern kingdom, America, and then what if 9/11 2020 is about the southern kingdom, Israel? And that's what I believe is highly possible. Okay. Um, okay. So, and what was very interesting about 9/11 is, and so I really think one of the things is that God sent a really strong prophetic message in 9/11 too. Okay. Besides all the other things he was trying to accomplish. Um, and so what was very interesting in it is that you had the North Tower and the South Tower that fell. Okay. Um, so definitely very interesting. And so I kind of think that God was really painting the picture of 9/11, um, like throughout this whole one event, he was painting the picture of, like, I am thinking he was painting the picture of what's happened on 9/11 2001 and what's going to happen on 9/11 2020. And then maybe just this whole picture about the end of days. Okay. Um, and then, so then other things about, so definitely the North Tower and the South Tower would connect us to this history of the Southern Kingdom falling 19 years after the Northern Kingdom. And I do believe that it was, okay. Now, I get confused because like one tower got hit first and the other tower fell first. And so I don't know if the North Tower fell first. Um, um, but anyways, but there's definitely, because I think there's a picture God showing with first the airplanes hitting and then second with the buildings falling. And so, um, so that's the order we probably want to look at more. So wait, hang on a sec. I have my 9/11 notes here. Okay, so at 8 a.m., the North Tower was hit first by American Airlines Flight 11. Okay, and then the South Tower was hit second by United Airlines 175. Um, um, and so I think we want to look at that. So the North Tower was hit first, then the South Tower. Okay. So 9/11 2001 would be connected to the North Tower, the Northern Kingdom, and America. And then 9/11 2020, I believe, will be connected to Israel. Okay, and so then in the Bible, so let's look at 19 in the Bible. So Genesis 19 is the doom of Sodom. Okay. And I already mentioned this, the brimstone and fire from heaven. Okay. So definitely, definitely something to pay attention to. Is God giving us a clue with the chapter number Genesis 19? That's happening in Genesis. The doom of Sodom and Gomorrah is happening in Genesis 19. And then we also see in Revelation 19 that also mentions the fall of Babylon. Okay. So definitely very significant. And then, okay, so here I have a couple of the verses from Revelation 19. Okay, Revelation 19:2, because his judgments are true and righteous, for he has judged the great harlot who was corrupting the earth with her immorality, and he has avenged the blood of his bondservants on her. And then verse 11, okay, so 19:11, and I saw heavens opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. Okay, so what I think is interesting about the verse 11 is that that I believe that when Israel gets attacked, we're going to see Jesus show up. Okay. So that's interesting, an interesting verse. And then the verse Revelation 19:2 talks about the great harlot. I believe that Trump is the great harlot, and basically because we see Trump with this UAE quote unquote peace deal, where he's trying to gather all the Arab nations to join under this peace deal. And, like the merchants of the world, okay, that connects to Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18, okay? So Trump is the harlot riding the beast, okay? The beast is Obama, okay? What's interesting, or the beast, you could actually look at the beast as being, like the Muslim religion, okay? And then, because it's interesting that all these nations that he's trying to make deals with connected to Israel are Muslim nations, okay? And then, um, but what was really interesting too was I've talked before about the numbers 13 and the numbers 23 being connected to Obama, because Obama did a bunch of stuff on the 23rd of months. And so when Trump announced his UAE deal, it was on August 13th, and then it was the 23rd of the Hebrew month. Okay. Okay, so 9/11 2001. Okay, here's just one little thought that I had was what if 9/11 2001, the way, if you could look at it where it's like 9/11/20 the first, okay? Like you see a 9/11/20 in there, okay? And then if you look at 9/11/2020, you could say it's 9/11/20 the second, okay? And so I connect that to like fallen is Babylon, like the two fallings of Babylon, the two fallings of the two events on 9/11. I mean, assuming everything happens the way I think it's going to happen. I also had a thought about the 20, 9/11/20, the 20th. I mean, there might actually be 20 different 9/11s, what God would consider 9/11s. Okay. And then originally I was so convinced that everything was going to happen on the 18 years. And the reason why is I was looking at these verses. Okay, in Luke 13, it says, "Or do you suppose that those 18 on whom the tower in Shiloh fell and killed them were worse culprits than all the men who live in Jerusalem?" Okay, so what's interesting about that, so since things, okay, well, I'll talk about the 18th year, but we're moving into the 19th year on 9/11. But what's interesting about 18 is that you could parse that out to be 666, okay? And so what I think is these verses are connecting the 666 with the tower, which connects us to the Tower of Babel, okay, which connects us to Babylon, okay? And then Jesus goes on to saying, unless you repent, you'll be like them or something like that. And then in Luke 13, we read about this woman who for 18 years had a sickness because she was bent double, okay? And then, so that 18 could definitely connect to 666. So this woman was sick because of the 666, that the beast from the earth created, which would be a picture of Trump's peace deals. And then, so, because it's interesting, because, they gave Jesus a hard time for healing this woman on the Sabbath. And then, they said there's 6 days in which work should be done. So come during them and get healed and not on the Sabbath day. Which is kind of interesting because if you look at that, then it's like saying, if you connect 6 to Trump, then it's like saying, well, get healed by Trump, instead of by the Messiah who heals on the Sabbath day. Okay. And then it goes on to say, and this woman, a daughter of Abraham as she is. So what's interesting is that Trump called this UAE quote unquote peace deal the Abrahamic covenant. So that was kind of interesting. He was really trying to be like the Messiah. Anyways, so then it says, and this woman, a daughter of Abraham as she is, whom Satan has bound for 18 long years. Okay, so so Trump has bound us with the 666. Okay, should she have not been released from this bond on the Sabbath day, the day of um, the Messiah. Okay, well, so what I think is interesting is that you could look at it where the 18th. Okay, so what's interesting is that on the Saturday the 12th is the Hebrew date of 9/11 2001. Okay, and so you could say that it's still the 18th year on Friday. And then we move into the 19th year on Saturday, if you're following the Hebrew calendar. So, so maybe my connection with these to the 18th year isn't completely, um, thrown away. Okay, so, but I wanted to emphasize this. Okay, this woman was bent double. Okay, I think that connects to, okay, not only do you have the 18, which connects to Trump 666, but this woman was bent double. Okay, and so I think that connects to the two peace deals, quote unquote, of Trump. Okay, okay, so 9/11 2001. Okay, let's see. Okay, so here's important information. Oh, so what did I put here? It was 9/11 2001 is, 18 years, 11 months, 2 days to August 13th, which was when Trump did his UAE peace deal. Um, so definitely interesting that it was 18 years, 11 months, um, you know, from 9/11. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, so then this is really significant too, is that Kristallnacht. Okay, if you remember what Kristallnacht was, that's called the Night of Broken Glass. Um, that was when the Germans came and attacked the Jewish businesses, and broke windows and looted stores, really similar to what's happening with the rioting right now in America. So definitely very interesting. And what's interesting is that I've heard rabbis say that Kristallnacht was really kind of the start of like what led to the Holocaust. Okay. Um, and really kind of the start and stuff like that. What's interesting about Kristallnacht is that it's also, they call it the Night of Broken Glass, but it's like windows were broken. Okay. And so I think that's really interesting because I connect Trump to be the window, and Messiah is the door. Okay. And so windows being broken, on a 9/11. Well, okay. So Kristallnacht was actually, okay. So I wrote 9/11 1938, and actually this that's like the European date. Okay. So it was actually November 9th and November 10th. Okay. Um, and but they write their dates backwards, so it looks like a 9/11, when you write it out. Okay. um so i thought I thought that was really interesting because we definitely see kind of this precedent in the modern era of, we want to look to either a 9/11 or 11/9, for things to happen significantly to God's people. Okay. um um and what's interesting, the reason why I was looking at the 9th of Av back in August 30th, for things to happen, is that's the Hebrew date, 9/11, the 9th of Av being the 11th month. And that's where there was a lot of stuff in history that had happened to the nation of Israel and the Jewish people, because both temples were destroyed on that day. I think there's 5 events that happened on that day. Very significant date. So that's why I was like, surely something's going to happen this year on the 9th of Av. But, if we're ending up the time, if we're finishing up the time of the Gentiles, God could be working on, I mean, he uses both, he's saying stuff both with the Hebrew date and the Gregorian date. But I think, and I mean, basically, if something doesn't happen on the Hebrew date, then let's look at the Gregorian date. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Okay, so Kristallnacht was November 9th and 10th. It's interesting because if you take 9 and 10, that adds up to 19. Kristallnacht is 62 years, 10 months, 3 days until 9/11/2001. So very interesting because we see in the book of Daniel 9, 62 years. Well, in the actual scripture, it's 62 sevens are connected to the anointed gets cut off. Okay, so that's why 62 is really significant. So that makes 9/11/2001, just and I guess basically, you know, like up until the 62nd year, up until the 63rd year, which would be, I guess, November. Okay, November this year. And so, so it's kind of interesting when you talk about like in the 62nd year, the anointed was cut off. It's interesting because we've already seen some of that with the coronavirus. It's like, we've seen kind of a falling of America with the coronavirus. We've seen a falling of Israel with the coronavirus. And then now in America, we're seeing kind of a falling of America with the rioters. And then, in Israel, we're seeing a falling of Israel with they're being attacked, by, well, they have rioting and protesting going. I mean, it's just on a much smaller scale in Israel too. And then also, they've been getting attacked by Hamas and Hezbollah. So definitely very interesting. So why did I put this here? 69 years, 11 months, 27 days until 11/4/08. November 4th. Okay, I had some reason. I can't remember now what happened on 11/4/08. So sorry, it's hard to keep track of everything all the time. Okay, but what's interesting is that Kristallnacht is 81 years, 10 months, 3 days until 9/11/2020. Okay. And so in this video, okay, so I want to give you some other pictures of, similar to 9/11 that I think God has been giving us. Okay, so we have the Trump Tower on Saturday, April 7th, 2018. There was 6 firefighters injured trying to put out this fire. It happened on the 50th floor. Okay, so this is in New York City. Okay, this is Trump's tower. So what's interesting is you had a little bit of a flavor of 9/11 in terms of, I mean, on a much times 100 smaller scale. Because I mean there was only one guy that died on this day. But you kind of have the same picture of like the smoke and the fire, and then there was like things falling out of the windows. Okay, so definitely interesting. I told you like Trump's the window guy. Okay, so interesting that we see the fire in these windows. Okay, and so it's interesting because you got the fire on the two sides, and then like kind of this no fire. You don't see the fire in the middle. I'm sure it's going on in the middle, but you don't see it. So there's this picture that God's showing us. And even, oh, I can't remember if I wrote this down in here. Even 9/11 itself, if you think of 9 being like Jesus and then 11 being a picture of the 2 pillars of Israel, the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom, it's like you got Jesus in the middle, and then Jesus is going to show up when you see America burning on the left and Israel burning on the right. So then, so let's pick about, let's look at the, let's unpack this, okay, as everyone says. So what's interesting is that this happened on Nissan 22. Okay, so I think 22 is very significant. And what's interesting is that 9/11 happens on the 22nd of Elul, on the 22nd of Elul is 9/11. And so the reason why that's interesting to me is because Psalm 22 is like, my God, why have you forsaken me? That psalm. So definitely a very significant psalm. It's kind of interesting because the 22nd could be looked at as day 8. Okay. So you have like the 15th to the 21st of Elul would be like a like a 7-day time period. Similar to Passover, similar, the 15th to the 21st is what happened when Passover happened, when Sukkot happens. And then the 22nd would make it an 8th day. Okay, so that's significant because we see circumcision, someone being cut off, happens on the 8th day. Okay, so that is showing up on the 9/11 date. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, so I thought it was very interesting that this was on the 50th floor. I talk about 5 being connected to Judah. I think 5 connects to the Messianic era because I think 1335, where you have like 1 would be a picture of the deal of the century, or even connected to like Trump, and then the 3 would be the 3 days of fasting for the Jews and the 3 days of fasting for the Gentiles, which we see in the book of Esther. Also the 1 could be connected to the 30 days, which is very interesting because 9/11 is 30 days after Trump's UAE peace deal. Okay, so very interesting. And so I actually think with the 1335 and in the book of Esther, where we see 33 and 3 and then the 3rd day, what's that we see, Esther goes to the king on the 3rd day, which would be like connected to 5, like Jesus having the 5 because he's from the tribe of Judah. So we see 1335, and then, but I think it's kind of like repeated because I think we had the deal of the century, then we have the 3 judgments of Israel and the 3 judgments of America, and then we have the 5th day or the 50th day, or whatever it is for the 1335, so the Messianic era basically. But then you could also look at it where the 1 is now the UAE deal, and then you still have the 3 and the 3 judgments, and then the 5 would be the Messianic era. Okay, so then what is also very interesting about the number 50 is that I just saw this today. Okay, is that Haman builds a gallows for Mordecai 50. It's probably not 50 feet. It's 50 cubits high, or whatever it is. It's the number 50. Okay, so 50 is actually connected to the gallows. Okay, so that is very interesting. Okay. Okay, and so let's see. What was very interesting to me was that the 3rd blood moon, the Golan announcement, which I would consider would be like the 3rd 6, okay, of Trump's 666, that it was 1 day shy of 50 weeks after this fire. So that actually happened. The 3rd blood moon actually happened 49 weeks and 6 days. Okay. And I mean, actually, if you look at it, with from the hour, you might, if you break it down to the hour, it might actually show up on 50. Okay, 50 weeks. So definitely very interesting. Then what's interesting was 3/17/19 was 11 months 11 days after this fire. Okay, so what was very interesting about that is that was St. Patrick's Day. That was, okay, wait, 3/17. When was this fire? Okay, so I wrote 3/17/19 is 11 months, 11 days. And that was St. Patrick's Day. But then, um, like, so I got my years confused. I wrote 50th state with coronavirus. Actually, that was a year before 3/17. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, 3/17/19. 3/17 of this year was when we had the 50th state with coronavirus. Okay, so that would actually be what's 12 plus 11. I don't know. I'd have to do the math to the 3/17/20 of this year. So it's hard to keep all these things straight. But what's interesting so I think 3/17/19, which was St. Patrick's Day, what was interesting about that is that that was 2 days after the Notre Dame fire, which I have on another slide. And then it was interesting because that was when someone was trying to set fire to okay, so I think I'm getting my years confused here. We'll have to go look at the Notre Dame fire. But what's very interesting to me is that I see a connection with St. Patrick's Day to Trump, and I think it has to do with the fact that he's the 666 guy, because St. Patrick, he worked with shamrocks, okay, that had three-sided shamrocks, okay. So I think God is using St. Patrick to send us messages about Trump. Anyways, so Saturday, April 7th, if you add those together, the 4 plus 7, April 7th gives you 11. The 2018 gives you 11, and so then that adds up to 22, which I talked about how that was significant. But it's just significant that it's like 11/11, okay? Because what's interesting about that is that, if you think about 11 being judgment, it's like, if you have Israel burning on the right and America burning on the left, then they're both under judgment, okay? So highly significant. Okay, so here's the Notre Dame file. Okay, so it was in 2019. Oh, it was in April. Okay. Oh, see, this is why. Okay, so kind of interesting. The Notre Dame fire happened April 15th to the 16th, 2019. That was Nissan 10 to 11. Okay, so definitely very interesting that you have 11 there. And then I was wondering if this was the 11th month warning about the coronavirus, because what's interesting is Notre Dame stands for Our Lady, okay? So if you understand that the Christians are like the bride of Christ, and then the Jewish people are like the brothers of Christ, the Christians would be the women, the Jewish people would be the men, so then when it talks about Our Lady, we want to look at the Christians or look at America, okay? And so I just thought this was interesting that it was 11 months before the coronavirus, so kind of like God giving us a warning that we're going to see the falling of Our Lady, okay? And so our judgment on America was going to start with the coronavirus, okay? And then, so then, like I said, on April 17th, which, would have been like the third day of the fire, someone tried to set fire to St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. So definitely you see the connection to like I said, St. Patrick's connects to Trump. You got the New York City, which connects to Trump, connects to Babylon. And then, so I thought that was interesting that, I said the 11th morning, that was interesting because the shutdown started on March 18th. Okay. But then really, I think something happened March 17th. I put this on here where I said 3/17 was the 50th state with coronavirus, but it was in the year 20, so a little confusing there. So definitely very interesting. I really think God was, is sending us messages, so it's interesting because you see the fire, you see the smoke. We saw the spire fell, in the Notre Dame fire. um let's see. And then, oh, okay, so I wrote some of the stuff here. What was interesting is this happened in France. France has 6 letters in it. I said it was symbolic of America falling. It was 69 weeks before the United Arab Emirates deal. Um, let's see, so kind of a connection to, Babylon. Um, and then what I thought was interesting is the spire on this church was not near the 2 towers. It's kind of in the middle of the church. Okay. And so I think the spire could represent Trump, who doesn't care about the 2 pillars. Okay. So definitely very interesting. And we see a connection with all of this with Samson and the 2 pillars. Okay. I, you know, the story of Samson in the book of Judges. Okay. Um, and so Samson ends up, getting the 2 pillars kind of knocked down. Okay. I think that's a connection to Trump because of what Trump's doing with this quote unquote peace deals. He's actually, he's causing America to fall. Basically, there's 2 reasons why. One, because of his peace deals, he's getting judgment put on America. But the other thing too is because he's so worried about making a name for himself, he's not really doing anything about the rioters. Okay, so while he's busy trying to get these peace deals in the Middle East, he's ignoring what's happening in his own country. And then he's gonna get Israel, um, thrown down because while he's making these peace deals with Israel's enemies, basically, he's able to get these people to join his peace deal, like United Arab Emirates. But it's what's kind of interesting is UAE. You know, I mean, they weren't really friends with Israel, um, but they weren't exactly a direct threat like Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and stuff like that. So um, but Trump has this delusion that if he can get enough Arab nations to join his peace deal, that would cause Iran, to lay down their arms in their hatred for Israel, um, and get on board with this great economic, peace treaty. Um, he's delusional. Okay, same thing with the Palestinians. I mean, when he did the deal of the century, he thought the Palestinians would jump on board, and they have just all it's done is made the Palestinians angrier and Iran angrier. And actually, there's a group of them that are joining together. Um, so that's the deal with that. So then it was interesting that April 17th was the 3rd day. So I already talked about that. New York City, 3-sided shamrock. Okay, is this a fiery furnace warning? Okay, so it was 69 weeks until Babylon and UAE. It was 13 months, 10 days until the riots started in America. Okay. So definitely interesting. And then, okay, so then what I thought was really neat is that, okay, wait a minute. Oh, okay, so this is a different fire. I gotta remember all this stuff. Okay, so then what we had was on July 18, 2020, we had the Gothic Cathedral of St. Peter and St. Paul in Nantes Cathedral. Okay, so what's interesting about this cathedral, it's from the 15th century. So we got that 15 number there. Which is like 555 connected to probably the Messiah. And then what I thought was interesting is it's called St. Peter and St. Paul. Okay. And so if you remember that Peter had Okay, so what was it? Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, and Peter was the apostle to the Jews. And so you see this picture with St. Peter and St. Paul of, like the northern and southern kingdoms, the Jew and the Gentile connection. Okay, so definitely very interesting. Nantes, this is also in France too. So, you know, you, the city of Nantes is 6 letters, and France is 6 letters. So definitely very interesting. Um, and then if you take July 18, 2020 and add them all together, it's 718 plus 4 equals 11. Okay. Um, so now this is kind of interesting because the fire's like in the middle. We saw the fire on the two sides. Um, and so what I was wondering about this is, let's see, did I talk about that? Where, like the fire in the middle could be a picture of the burning bush that's not consumed. Um, and so I believe that, Jesus is like in the middle of the burning bush where like Israel's burning on the left and America's burning on the right. Um, then Jesus is, um, he walks, Jesus is the one that comes out of the fiery furnace. He's the fourth, you know, um, the Son of God that comes out of the fire. Okay, so he's not consumed. He doesn't get burnt up in the fire in the judgments. Okay. Um, and it was kind of interesting because this fire, they were able to, it didn't really cause that much damage, which was good. Okay. Um, and then so here's another picture of it. And so what I thought was interesting is that you had this ladder with the firemen, putting out the fire, and then you had this forklift. Okay. And so the ladder reminds us of Jacob's ladder. It's interesting that it's kind of in the middle, because Jacob had a dream, and a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So definitely, um, even the ladder picture is the same, 9/11 picture, with the two sides of the ladder, with kind of rungs in the middle. You have still kind of that same picture of the pillars on either side. And then, okay, so did I write this on this next page? So what's interesting is the ladders on the right, um, um, the viewers, right, could, represents Jesus. Um, and then, so I think Jesus, like Paul could be a picture of Jesus. Okay. Now, if you remember about Peter, he was the one who denied Jesus 3 times. Okay. And then, so then the bent forklift on the left in the window could represent Trump. And what's interesting is not fully extended. Okay. Like the ladder's higher up. Okay. Um, and then, so it's interesting because that kind of reminds us of the lady bent for 18 years, okay, that I read about, okay. Um, so, just kind of interesting, okay. And I don't know if I looked at July 18th, besides it connecting to 11, if there was any connection to, the timing of things. I'll have to think about that. Okay. So then, with the 9/11 picture we saw showed up in the Back to the Future movie, okay? And so there was 9/11 hidden clues in that movie, okay? So in the first movie, the first Back to the Future movie, we saw Marty goes to the Twin Pine Malls at 1:16 a.m., okay? And so I blew this up, the 1:16, and flipped it over, and it looks like 9/11, okay. But what's kind of interesting too is that it kind of looks like 91-1, okay. And the 91 could, be like a hidden picture of the 19, okay. Possible. Okay, so 91 or 19. Okay. And then when Marty returns to the mall at the end of the movie, it's 1:33 a.m. The mall is now called the Lone Pine Mall. Okay, so what's interesting about that is if Marty's a messianic figure, the Twin Pines, would be a picture of the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. And then with the 9/11 picture we saw, with 9/11 in New York, we actually saw a picture of this where it's like the two towers fall and then one tower gets built up. Okay. Um, so there's kind of a picture of where the Jew and the Gentiles fall, and then God brings them together in the Messiah, to be one kingdom. Okay. I don't want to emphasize too much like the one tower, because the one tower kind of reminds me of the Tower of Babel. So I like that these are trees, like twin trees, and then the one tree, you know. Um, and then so then Marty returns to the mall right when Doc is being shot by the Libyans. Okay, so if Marty's a messianic figure, so if you think of the Libyans being, a picture of terrorists, and Doc Brown, um, could be a picture of the Jewish people, because like his Brown is 5 letters, Brown, um, and so I thought it was interesting. Oh, so my next picture here, yeah, so here you see, Doc holding up his hands, getting shot. Oh, which even that itself, he's got his two hands up, is even kind of like a picture, a 9/11 picture. Um, and so if you look at this and you have Marty as the 5, okay, so then there's 5 letters in Marty, 5 letters in McFly. So Marty is a messianic figure who saves Doc Brown from the Libyans, okay? So what we see is that 1335 repeated, or not repeated, but showing up here, just in this screen. So we got the 9/11 picture and then we got the 1335 picture. So definitely kind of cool how God does that. Okay. And then I showed this picture. This actually comes from earlier in the movie, when Doc sent. Oh, wait, do I talk about that? Oh, I didn't. Oh, because I did another video about Back to the Future where I talk more about it. But this is when Doc sends Einstein, like a minute into the past or something like that. And then it's interesting because Marty says, Doc, you fried Einstein. But I thought this shot right here was a very prophetic shot, because if you see Israel burning on the right and America burning on the left, you are out of time unless you belong to Jesus. Okay. So definitely this is a very prophetic picture. Oh, and it's kind of, I just thought of this too. I just saw the license plate, it says California. So it's kind of interesting because right now we do have California is burning up. The west of America is burning up. So, another prophecy there. Okay. And then I talked about, this is in the second movie, where, okay, so this, so here, this is the alternate reality that Marty goes to. Okay. And I thought it was interesting because I see a connection to the riots. Okay. In America. Okay. And it's interesting too because you got the Biff Tower. Okay, so Biff definitely is a Trump-like picture. Okay, I actually heard Jimmy Kimmel make a joke when he had um uh Doc Brown, the guy who plays Doc Brown, and Michael J. Fox on his show. They were doing a Back to the Future reunion type thing, and he actually, they were asking about Biff or something, and he made a joke and said, "Oh yeah, he's running for president." Um, and so he made a connection with Biff to Trump. So very interesting. Um, and then, okay, so what's interesting about the alternate reality? It's the third time frame in the second movie. The second movie was released on 11/22, okay, 1989. Okay, so very interesting. Okay, so in the second movie, first they're in the present day, then they go to the future, then they go to this alternate reality. Um, and so I thought that was interesting because it connects to the third time frame of punishment for America, the lion's den, which is the writers. Okay, so so it's very interesting because this third time frame, this alternate reality, is just a lot of shooting and rioting and craziness in the streets, and something going on with the police, and so definitely kind of a prophetic shadow of the rioting here in America. um, what's interesting is that Daniel's three friends, um, okay, let's see what okay, so Daniel's three friends, so the Daniel's three friends, that's in the Bible. They could represent the third time frame in Israel. Um, and then um, okay, so basically what was interesting in this movie, the second movie, is you have Doc and Marty and Jennifer. Okay, and so that connects to the United Arab Emirates. Okay, so if you connect like the second movie to the second peace deal of Trump, um, then then it's interesting that we have Doc, Marty, and Jennifer. Um, um, and so that connects to Daniel's three friends in the fiery furnace. Let me think. Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego end up in the fiery furnace. Um, so definitely, so it's interesting because Doc, Marty, and Jennifer basically show up in this alternate reality. Um, and then what's interesting in that movie too is that we had young Jennifer um, meeting. Okay, Doc talked about young Jennifer meeting old Jennifer could have been a time paradox, like the world could end kind of thing. You know, um, solar system. Anyways, it was just kind of interesting that he mentioned that. So just kind of that apocalyptic message, basically. I circled here too about bikers. It says welcome bikers, to Biff's pleasure paradise. So kind of, I mean, it's interesting if you recognize that like Trump's deal of the century and the United Arab Emirates is, it's all about economy. It's all about pleasure. Okay. Um, of let's be rich, let's drink wine, let's have a good time. So definitely interesting that Biff's tower is called Pleasure Paradise. And then I thought it was interesting that it said welcome bikers because I mean this is just kind of weird, but Trump this year had on July 3rd he had his one of his 4th of July parties during COVID in South Dakota. And I thought that was interesting because then, a month later or something like that, um, is when they had Sturgis in South Dakota. Um, so I'll just kind of interesting, you know, just kind of weird connections. So don't know. Anyways, but and this picture is kind of weird too because this must be a picture from the transition in the movie because the police car kind of looks ghosty. So I thought that was kind of interesting because it's like during the rioting, it's like we're trying to slowly eliminate the police. you know so I thought that was kind of interesting. um okay, so then I talked about, okay, so other places where we see these 9/11 pictures is the burning bush. I talked about that. Because because if you read about the burning bush, it says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. Okay, so same thing. You got Jesus in the middle. You got the bush burning with fire on either side. But then it says, yet the bush was not consumed. And that's also a picture of like basically somehow out of America burning on the right and Israel burning on the left. Um, or the other way around. Somehow out of this, God is going to, still build his kingdom. He's still gonna, like, basically, God talks about having a remnant, and, so he's still gonna draw, out of the two fallings of these nations, he's still going to gather a people and build the kingdom. Okay. Establish his kingdom. Okay. So that's the burning bush. Samson and the two pillars. So Samson actually puts his hand on the right and puts his hand on the left, and he pushes and he knocks down the roof. There's a lot of mess, like prophetic shadows in that story. We also saw Jesus on the cross. Okay. Where there's two thieves crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. Okay. Um, so the burning on the right and the burning on the left, the judgment on the right, the judgment on the left. Okay. The nativity scene, okay, so is definitely a repeat of this picture. You got Jesus in the middle. Mary would be a picture of the church. Joseph would be a picture of the Jewish people. Okay. Okay, and I think this picture is repeated in the 3 supermoons of 2019. Okay. And so we had January, February, March, we had 3 supermoons, blood moons. All in a row. Okay. And so the first one happened on January 21st, then February 19th, and then March 21st. In the February 19th one, I highlighted the 19 because I thought that was kind of interesting. So maybe, kind of like Jesus shows up in the middle of, the 19 years between the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. So the January moon, okay, so what I was thinking was, if you look at the January moon, it's called the wolf moon. There was a lunar eclipse, okay? It talks about wolves howling at the moon, okay? So I kind of think that the moon could be a picture of the Christians, because the moon, the story of the moon, it like ebbs and flows in brightness, okay? And so it could really be a picture of the church, of how it kind of ebbs and flows in its brightness, and we're definitely in the dark side of Christianity right now. Where there's just not a lot of brightness. And So I thought it was interesting too that you have wolves howl at the moon. Okay, so the rioters would definitely be a picture of the wolves, because I mean, if you have moon being a picture of Trump, even, um, and so, like, Jesus would be the sun, or the Jewish people would be a picture of the sun. Um, I mean, more so like Jesus, the bright sunshine. Um, so you have that picture of, Trump, the moon, and Jesus, the bright sun. So we have the wolves howling at the moon. So the rioters in America, a lot of what drives them is their hatred of Trump. Okay. And then also too, just their hatred of Christianity too in America. And then, so January 21st was that was kind of interesting because it was the second year, first day of Trump. Okay. So that two-year one day connects to the 21. There's something about 777, and I don't totally know what that is. Oh, this is what it is. Okay, so 777, the 21 connects to Lamech in okay, so I think Lamech might be the father. This is in Genesis when it's kind of given a list of genealogy. And I mean, sometimes a lot of people ignore these things, but I think Lamech is the one that talks about Noah and says he will give us rest. And then Lamech dies at 777 years old. And so I think what it means is like, so it might have a lot to do with like 777. If you think of the three time frames that America's going to go through and Israel's going to go through of judgment, um, which connects to the three times of testing that Jesus went through. Um, so then it's like 777 would be a picture of the completion of those three time frames of judgment. Okay. Um, so the nation's going to fall when it's done with its judgment, three judgments. And the reason why there's three judgments is because of Trump 666. Okay. Um, and then what was interesting is January 21st is also the new year for trees on the Hebrew calendar. That could connect to, if this is a picture connected to the wolves, it was like we got a new, Trump fell in power, and then the 10 horns rose up in power, which are, connected to Obama. And if you don't believe that, like, Obama's like the father of these rioters. When he was president, we saw rioting happening when he was president. Um, and he was always encouraging the rioters when he was president. And then um, at the DNC, when he made his speech this year, Obama talked about how they were like shining lights, the rioters. I mean, the guy's delusional. Um, so, um, anyways, okay. So what was interesting too was that on January 21st was 11 months after Billy Graham died. So I thought it was kind of interesting because like we we see 11, 12, and 13 connected to these blood moons too. Okay. Um, and then so 11 connects to judgment in the wolf moon. So then and then also we could see kind of a repeat of the peace deals too, where like with the wolf moon, that could be a picture of the deal of the century, where it says the wolves howl at the moon could also be a picture of the Palestinians, where they weren't happy about this deal of the century. Okay. And then in the middle we had the snow. Okay, February 19th was the snow moon. Winter, I think, is connected to judgment. Okay. But this, February 19th could also connect to, Jesus, the Messiah. Like I said, this picture where Jesus is in the middle. And it was interesting that it was Purim Katan, kind of like this hidden Purim. Lots of prophetic shadows with Purim. The February snow moon was considered the biggest super moon. We see with snow, though your sins are as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow, which is interesting when you see kind of like these moons being reddish. And then the 12 months after Billy Graham died, so that kind of connects to the 12 tribes. We also kind of see a connection to the woman with the 12 stars on her head. Okay, so then the worm moon, March 21st. Okay, so so I mean, one thing about, so you had the same 777 on that date. So what's interesting is that the worm can connect to the story in Jonah where it says God appointed a worm when dawn came the next day and it attacked the plant and it withered. The plant could be a picture of, like the vine that God took out of Egypt and set up, but then the worm came and attacked it. Um, um, and then, so it connects to that. So definitely connects to the falling of one of, the plants, the God set up. So March 21st. So it's interesting because that was like the Purim, but I was wondering if you can consider that like the second Purim, where we had the hidden Purim in February, or the Jewish people call it Purim Katan, because see, it was a leap year this year on the 2019, and so that's why we ended up having two Purims. And they consider the first one to be, like the minor Purim. So then the second one would be the actual day of Purim, and so I wondered if you can consider that the second Purim, which would definitely make a connection to the second peace deal of Trump. Um, and because it was interesting too, because there was a whole connection to 13, because Barron Trump turned 13, like I think the day before, like maybe March 20th. And then, for Billy Graham, it was 13 months after he died. So a big connection to 13. And then it was spring the day before this super moon, blood moon. So I definitely think God's painting, kind of repeating that picture with the blood moons. Okay. Um, you know, I mean, like God likes, he has his pictures, and he definitely repeats them everywhere. Oh, so here I have the story. I put the story of Samson in here. About the pillars. Okay, so let's read this. Now the Lord of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their God and to rejoice, for they said, our God has given Samson, our enemy, into our hands. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands, even the destroyer of our country, who has slain many of us. It so happened when they were in high spirits that they said, call for Samson that he may amuse us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he entertained them, and they made him stand between the pillars. Then Samson said to the boy who was holding his hand, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests, that I may lean against them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there. And about 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. Then Samson called to the Lord and said, O Lord God, please remember me, and please strengthen me just this time, O God, that I may at once be avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson grasped the 2 middle pillars on which the house rested and braced himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bent with all his might, so that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than those whom he killed in his life. Then his brothers and all his father's household came down, took him, brought him, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. Thus he had judged Israel 20 years. Okay, there were so many prophetic shadows in here. And I think the story ends up getting repeated twice. Because, you can read through the story first and then, see like the Philistines being the BLM rioters. But then you could read through it again and see the Philistines being connected to like the Palestinians and whoever ends up ultimately attacking Israel. Um, um, so definitely very interesting. And so, so the Philistines offering a great sacrifice to Dagon their god. Okay, so that connects to, the BLM people who don't follow God, but have their own religion. False religion, like Baal Peor. And then, you know, let's see. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has given our enemy into our hands. So we see, so this actually connects to Revelation 11, where you have the 2 witnesses. The 2 witnesses would be a picture of, American Israel. And, so if you read the story first connected to America, we see the rioters, they feel like, God has given their enemy into their hands. So they're able to riot and, against Trump, where they call him the destroyer of our country, and then, and even, or you could even say like God has given our enemy could be the police, who has slain many of us, so that's happening. And then, so, okay. So then, Okay, so then, let's connect this to, um, so then in the story, Samson goes on to stand between the two pillars. So that's a picture of Trump going to, um, making his UAE deal. Okay. So it's interesting because with Trump, it's like he's kind of repeating that pattern where he stands in the middle, but instead of the Christians on the one side and the Jewish people on the other side, Trump has the Jewish people on one side and the Arabs on the other side. Okay, so see how he's like a false messiah with a false picture. Okay, and so Trump stands between the pillars. Okay, and then he says to Samson says to the boy who was holding his hand. Okay, that could be a picture of Netanyahu, who is um like um I mean, you could do it either way, where Samson, the boy, could be Trump, and then like Samson being Netanyahu, or the other way around. Either way, it's the blind leading the blind, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, because Samson, they had, before the story, part of the story, they had cut out his two eyes. Okay, um, and so that's why this boy had to lead him. Okay. And then, so it says, let me feel the pillars on which the house rests that I may lean against him. So we see that with Trump, where he's, leaning, stretching out his hand, he's doing these things in both America and Israel that aren't really that great for both countries. Okay. Um, and then it says the house was full of men and women. So that could be a picture of, like, um, the people that are in the Trump house, basically. And then it says all the lords of the Philistines were there. Um, could be a picture of, so we have kind of these people that are jumping into this house, or on the bandwagon with Trump with the UAE deal. And then you have the Philistines, could be a picture of the Palestinians and other people that aren't really happy about this peace deal. Um, and then it says, and then about 3,000 men and women were on the roof looking on while Samson was amusing them. Okay, so that 3,000 number is connected to 9/11 because approximately 3,000 people died. And it's actually connected to the story of Pentecost, which, the story of Pentecost actually does lead back to the Tower of Babel if you kind of compare, because it talks about everyone speaking the same language or speaking different languages. I don't remember. Like, Pentecost might be the reverse of the Tower of Babel or something like that, but they're connected. Um, then Samson called to the Lord and said, "O Lord, please remember me and please strengthen me just this time, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes." Okay, so two eyes, we see that picture of the two witnesses. Okay. Um, and so actually, Samson right here could be more of a picture of Jesus, where, you know, like I said, that Jesus shows up just as the two pillars are falling, Jesus shows up in the middle. Okay. And then what's interesting in 29, verse 29, which you could add together and get 11, it says, Samson grasped the two middle pillars on which the house rested, embraced himself against them, the one with his right hand and the other with his left. See the repeat of all those things. The northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. And then Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Okay. So Trump's deal to make life better for the Palestinians gets them killed. But also, like, what we're seeing is when the pillars fall, like you it's connected to the Philistines. And he bent with all his mights. Okay, so it's interesting that it says he bent with all his might, because that connects to the woman that was bent over. So that the house fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead whom he killed at his death were more than whom he killed in his life. Okay. So basically, kind of this picture of, Samson was like this judge, okay, but he just wasn't a very effective judge, in his judging, okay. Um, and he ended up being more successful dying when he died, you know. So, and so basically, what's going to happen is when Israel falls, that's going to be like the death of Trump, you know, um, uh, because it's just not going to look good to him. All of a sudden, all these people that are following him like he's the Messiah. Um, I mean, I don't know if all of them. I think some of them will, probably wake up. Um, and then, um, so then the Samson, it talks about he judged Israel 20 years. That could connect to the two pillars, the two peace deals of Trump. Um, so definitely a repeat of that. Um, but basically what the deal is that, so Samson is between the two pillars, and he ends up causing the whole house to fall. Okay, basically. And so, so that's the deal. We have Trump, he's got his hand on America and he's got his other hand on Israel, and he's going to end up causing the falling of both of them. Um, so then, I kind of repeat this picture of, um, like the Sea of Obama and the Sea of Trump. Okay, so this would be like the Red Sea picture. Okay. Um, and then where Jesus is in the middle with the dry land, and there's the sea on one side and the sea on the other. So kind of like a repeat of that, a similar picture, but this time instead of, um, Israel and Judah, it's, like, um, Trump's people on one side and then Obama's people on. Oh, so this actually connects more because remember how I said you got, you kind of got like Trump in the middle with the Arabs on one side and the Jewish people on the other side. Um, anyways, something similar to that, but basically when Moses goes through the Red Sea, there's a sea on one side and sea on the other, and we're seeing that in America where we're seeing this division, when we're seeing, like kind of like the people that follow Obama on one side and the people that follow Trump on the other. um and so with the Black Lives, so the people following Obama would be the BLM people. um and that connects to the fourth seal, um and the fourth beast in Daniel. And then it says, I look and behold an ashen horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. um like basically what I think this is a picture of, the ashen horse is like a picture of the coronavirus, and then it says Hades was following with them. So basically the coronavirus caused these rioters to come out of the abyss, basically out of the abyss, and then authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and famine and with pestilence and by the wild beast of the earth. Okay. um but what we're going to see is, in Revelation it talks about after the rioting in America, then the dragon goes and makes war with the rest of the people that follow God's commandment. The rest of the people that follow God's commandment, is, the Jewish people in it. So like, we've had the riot. We'll have the rioting happens. I think on, for 9/11 it'd be 110 days of the rioting. Um, it's either on that day or on the 12th. It's 110 days of riot, or you know and then, so then the, when it says authority was given to them to kill with sword, then, God gives, these people the ability to kill Israel, to attack Israel. um so that's what happens. And then this, we have the Sea of Trump on the other side, and that would connect to all the people, joining him. Okay, so I talked about him, you know, his people being the shutdown protesters who don't wear masks. They want to get back to their life. They want to party. Um, you know, um, they don't want to be shut down. Um, and you know, um, so then I put in this verse because I think Trump's connected to the black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Okay, so even the scales is that same picture. Okay, so but the scales are connected to, like the two-piece deals of Trump with Trump in the middle. Okay, um, and but the scales too connects to buying and selling, okay, which connects to Babylon. Okay, so the other people in the sea of Trump would be the Babylon merchants that are buying and selling. Okay, um, and um, oh, so I didn't put this picture in here, but I have added to this picture like the BLM people are the hands, they have the hand. Okay, that connects to the 10 horns. Okay, um, but it also connects to the writing on the wall. Okay, because remember in Daniel, um, you know, Belshazzar, who's basically just partying and feasting, he sees a hand comes up and starts writing on the wall. Okay, so if you remember that a hand has 10 fingers, that connects to the 10 horns, which are the rioters. Okay, um, and so I thought that was wild. So the writing on the wall really with the rioters is God's trying to say, you know there's an end to your kingdom, Trump. Okay, um because of everything that you're doing. Okay, but Trump is not reading the writing on the wall, and so that's why he needs the Messiah to come and read the writing on the wall and say, your time is up, Trump. So that's what Messiah is gonna say to Trump. Okay. um so anyways, and so God's people would be, so we're going to end up walking on the dry land. We're going to, we're not going to be from the sea. Like Revelation, not Revelation, one of the Psalm 40 talks about he lifts me up out of the miry clay. Um, so he, Jesus is going to put us on the dry land and get us out of the sea with all these lies and just miry, um, you know, watered down truth and all that stuff. Um, so Revelation 16:19 says the great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Um, so that, comes out of the judgment. We see, kind of the judgment of Babylon, um, which is definitely strongly connected to 9/11. Um, So I wrote that God's people are quiet, they follow laws, they wear masks, they stay outside of Babylon. Right now they're kind of hidden, you know. Um, you know, um, um, so anyways, and so I already kind of talked about this, the 1335, so the first one could connect to the deal of the century. Then we have the three judgments on each of the America and Israel. Um, so basically where we're at right now is we're in the fiery furnace, if you haven't figured that out. Okay, so I believe that started on um August 4th, which was Obama's birthday. I think is when we started the fiery furnace. That was when the explosion happened in Lebanon. And then like 2 days later, August 6th, is when Hamas just started their like constant incendiary balloons to Israel. They were having constant fires every day. They did last week. They did get a ceasefire, but they're not really expecting it to hold. Um, and then what we're seeing in America too, like I didn't know when I made this chart that America would actually be part of the fiery furnace too. Um, um, because I knew we had the rioting, which, I kind of consider America burning with the rioting. Um, but we're also seeing, and I really think it has to do with judgment for the UAE deal. Um, you know, also, if Israel's burning, then God's gonna put, if the things Trump's doing causes Israel to burn, then America's gonna burn. So we're seeing the West, so there's a connection because the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are on the west side of Israel, and then so we're seeing the west of America burning, um, really bad, basically. Um, so let's see. So I wrote 110 days of Obama's people rioting. Um, and then, so basically, I divided it up into 71 days and 80 days because on Obama's birthday was when, the 71st day of the rioting. Um, that's when I think the fiery furnace started. And then the 80 days, that would be when the United Arab Emirates deal was announced on the 80 days. So I originally thought that the writing would go for 120 days. Um, but then it's, when Jesus is here, Jesus is going to be here for a week, and then he goes up to the mountain, like Moses, to talk to God to find out what we're supposed to do. Um, there's gonna be, you know, basically God's, like when Jesus gets out of the way and hides, he's gonna hide his people, and we're gonna be hidden in booths, and then um then he's just gonna let Obama's people and Trump people go to town, so we're definitely gonna see more burning, you know um happen. um Definitely gonna be dark after Jesus the restrainer gets out of the way, the destruction, we're gonna see the destruction, and I think Obama's gonna come back. I think Obama also comes back the same time that Jesus comes back, because basically the prophecies, we have Jesus with Judas and Peter. And so Peter would be Trump and Judas would be um, Obama. Um, okay. So then the 5 is the time of Messiah, the dividing of time. Okay, so then this is, I probably talked about this, the 9th of Av. So, like I said, it was kind of interesting because that's when, I thought something was going to happen on that day, but it didn't. But we see the 9th of Av, is a type of 9/11, like on the Hebrew calendar. And so, the both the first and second holy temples were destroyed on that day. Um, and then, that's when exile started. Um, let's see, yet the 9th of Av is also a day of hope. The Talmud relates that Moshiach, okay, the Talmud is, revered Jewish writings, relates that Moshiach, the anointed one, the Messiah, was born at the very moment the temple was set aflame and the Galut began. So so this is why I was looking at this, because there's, this teaching that they think that they believe the Messiah is going to come, you know, they believed that Mashiach came when the temple was set aflame and Galut began. But basically, what we can see is that when God, sends his ultimate, the third judgment on Israel, that is when the Messiah is going to show up, so they have that a little bit right. Um, um, let's see. And then they also say those who mourn the destruction of Jerusalem will merit seeing it rebuilt with the coming of Moshiach. So I think that is really prophetical, because basically right now, Jesus's people, the quiet people would be the ones that are mourning the destruction of what's happening in Israel and what's happening in America. And then we'll see it all rebuilt when Jesus comes. So then, okay. So the 9th of Av, let's see. 9/11, it was also the 22nd day of the 3 weeks of fasting. So we did see a 22 there too. That's why, I thought it was really significant. Um, and then it was the 66th day of the riots in America. But one of the things that was very interesting, so then you always got to recalculate when things don't work. But what I found out is that the 9th of Av was actually 6 weeks and 2 days before 9/11. Okay, so we see a repeat of that 62 um, with the 9th of Av. So definitely God was sending a message on the 9th of Av. Um, okay. So let's see. Okay, so then let's talk about 9/11. So what's very interesting is the 7th month, the 14th day after the deal of the century. Okay, what's very interesting about there's a lot of things that are really interesting about 7/14. Is Trump was born on July 14th. Okay, and so in Genesis, it says, in the story of Joseph, it says on the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday. So I thought that was interesting. So like, and basically what happens on the third day is the baker gets hung. Um, so the baker is connected to the bread, which is connected to the Jewish people. The wine, the cupbearer is connected to America. Um, connected to the Christians, because bread connects to Jesus's body, and Jesus's brothers are the Jewish people, and then the wine would kind of be like your lifeblood. It's connected to the blood of Jesus. Um, so that connects to the Christians. So 9/11 is 30 days from the UAE deal, so that's very significant because we see 30 in scripture a lot. And then it's the 70th day from July 4th. So I thought that was interesting. I talked about Trump being at Mount Rushmore on 7/3. What was interesting is Back to the Future was released on July 4th in 1985, 35 years ago. Thought that was kind of interesting. So it's interesting because you see that 35, like 1335. Thought that was kind of interesting. 9/11 is 10 years, 3 days from Rosh Hashanah, 2010. Okay, so the reason why I think that's important, and I talk about that in a different video, or I'm going, by the grace of God, going to talk about that in a different video, is that I believe the 10-year tribulation period, is going to be wrapping up around in this season. I don't believe in a 7-year tribulation. I believe in a 10-year tribulation. So that's in my other videos. So 9/11 is the 39th day after Lebanon explosion. 39 is interesting because Paul was given, instead of 40, he was given 39 lashings. So that could be a picture of the shortening of days, because like normally you'd probably expect 9/11 to be like the 40th day. So basically, I guess what that means is the fiery furnace, we don't have 40 days of the fiery furnace. We only have 39 because God shortens the days. And then it's 109th day of the riots in America. So the evening time, so I guess we don't have to have 110 days of riots. We just have 109. But evening time of 9/11 would be the 110th eve, I think. So 9/11 is 10 months after Rosh Hashanah of last year. 6 months after 3/11. 3/11 was like, I thought that was a significant day, 3/11, because that's when we found out that like the country was going to be shutting down and stuff. And so I think that was kind of the start of our judgments, even though lockdown happens the week later. So 9/11 is week 144 after 12/6/2017. which 12/6/2017 is when Trump made his announcement about moving the embassy to Jerusalem. 144 is interesting because it connects to the 144,000. So, like I said before, 9/11 is 6 weeks, 2 days after Tisha B'Av, in the 19th year after 9/11. Okay, and then, so I wanted to talk about the 7th month and the 14th day. Like I said, Trump was born 7/14/1946. Because, see, okay, so 9/12 to 9/18 would be a type of the Feast of Booths. The middle of the week would be 9/15, which is the 1335th day of Trump's presidency. So they're 1335 showing up again. Okay. This is why 9/11 is really standing out to me. Because we see in Daniel where it talks about in the middle of the week, he puts a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. So I really think that's when he resurrects the Jewish people after they get killed. What I believe is that, okay, so August 27th was the 7th month after the deal of the century. So what I'm thinking is that the real 7th month, like the hidden 7th month, started on August 27th. And so on the 7th month, the first day on the Jewish calendar is Rosh Hashanah. And I mean, basically in the Bible, all it says about the 7th month and the first day is it says it's a time of blowing. And so the Jewish people, they blow the shofar on that day. And it's the start of their days of awe and stuff like that. And so what was very interesting is that on the 7th month, after the deal of the century was when we had Hurricane Laura. Okay. So very interesting because the biggest part of there was the storm surge with Hurricane Laura, but it was definitely a huge wind event. Okay. Because they had, it was almost up to 150 miles per hour of wind. It was a Cat 4. So definitely very interesting. And then it was interesting. They had to move. I saw a story where 19 preemies had to be moved for Hurricane Laura, to protect them, the little babies. So thought that maybe God was sending a message with the 19. The Hurricane Laura was the 15th day after the United Arab Emirates deal. So kind of like it would be in the middle of the 30 days. Let's see. There was protest outside the White House during. Okay, so I thought it was interesting that God had, he had Hurricane Marco happen on the first day of the, even though that wasn't, I don't know how much damage that cost, but that happened on the first day. And then we kind of had like a couple days where people were, like, evacuating for Hurricane Laura. So like a lot of people were paying a lot more attention to this hurricane than the Republican National Committee. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. Because I kind of think that was part of God's judgment on Trump, but plus judgment on America. Because with the Hurricane Laura, we definitely see a big connection to Hurricane Katrina, which was judgment for. I don't even remember now what it was that Bush did with Israel, but definitely very interesting. A lot of connections there. And then it was interesting because the protest so there were protests outside the White House during the Republican National Committee, and they actually put up a gallows for Trump. I thought that was interesting because, like Gedalia, it kind of reminds me of Gedalia. He gets killed in the 7th month. I think Gedalia is kind of a Trump figure. Or he could be a Netanyahu figure. Anyways, but it was just kind of interesting that they put up a gallows for Trump. And then what's interesting, if you consider this, okay, so you know how in America we always say Christmas in July and we have Christmas in July sales. So I thought, so it's kind of interesting because the seventh month could be the time when we see the Messiah. Um, so, you know, um, and so I wanted to show you this is a picture of Hurricane Laura because when I'm looking at this, I'm like, that looks like, um, well, I mean, I didn't see it until, after I saw the hurricane and then I saw a shofar. I was like, whoa, or, well, this is a ram's horn. Okay. And so you definitely kind of get that picture of the horn, the ram's horn, with this path of this Hurricane Laura. And so that's what I think it's possible is that we had a seventh month that started on um, July 20 or August 27th. And then, so let's see. So then it's, so then what we have is the seventh month, the 14th day would be 9/11. Okay, well, so with the 14th day is, when um, the Passover lamb gets sacrificed. And then, then we would have the 15th to the 21st, which would be a type of booths, a feast of booths. Um, and then, so I was going to look at this because the 10th day, um, okay, so 14, 13, so what was interesting is, okay, so Labor Day would be like the 10th day. Um, um, so definitely very interesting. So like kind of like Labor Day, it's a day of rest. Would connect to Yom Kippur, the seventh month, the 10th day. Um, so um, and what's interesting on the Jewish calendar, they started their 12 days of reflection on Labor Day. Um, you know, so definitely could see things fitting into that time frame. This is just another verse from the Bible where, okay, so it says, the Lord spoke to you face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire. So another like burning bush picture. Um, I don't think I'll talk about this Genesis 7:11 because, oh, but what's interesting about Genesis 7:11 is that it's interesting because you see like the fountains of the great deep burst open and the floodgates of the sky were open. So we see kind of a connection to that number 8. Um, and so it says that happens on the second month. But I can't really quite figure out how to make the timing fit into 9/11 with this verse. But we see that picture number 8 because like it's kind of like the fountains, the heavens are open and the abyss is open. And so that connects to that the physical number 8, you know. Um and then although this could connect to 9/11 because you have the 62 kind of the 600th year in the second month. And so the second month would be the second peace deal. I don't know about the 17th day. Um although let's see, 17th day. Oh, although what's interesting about that is that Revelation 17 is the lion's den. So kind of like it could be saying that because what I really believe is that while the lion's den is happening in America, then the fiery furnace is going to happen in Israel. And so basically, so the 17th, could connect to the lion's den. The riot, which connects to the 10 horns, the judgment of the great harlot, so that connects to the rioting in America. And then 2 months after the deal of the century was March 17th, which was St. Patrick's Day. That I do think we saw kind of like the great flood. A great flood happened on March 17th. And that was, like I said before, the 50th day with coronavirus. The shutdown happened the next day. Okay, and then some other verses that connect to 9/11. So I believe Trump is the harlot. a Babylon riding on the beast. Genesis 11:9 is where we see the judgment of Babylon. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. And from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. Now, if you see, because Babel, it's about people speaking the same language. Okay, so that's what's happening with Trump's UAE. They're all speaking UAE deal. They're all speaking this economic language. Okay, and they think, if we unite under the fact that we all like money and being rich, and flying, jet setting around the world, then um, um, they think there'll be peace. Okay, but that's not going to bring peace. Okay, so so God brings, and then God sees that everyone's speaking the same language, and they're building this tower, and He brings judgment. Okay, um, and and kind of like they're building this tower in um, in the state of Israel. Like, it's interesting because I don't think any of these people care about Israel, but somehow Israel's in the middle of this thing. Um, and, um, and basically, it's not like they're doing it because they really want peace for Israel, you know. Um, so Revelation 17, I talked about it being a picture of the lion's den. Revelation 18 is the picture of the fiery furnace. Because and so that is definitely a picture of this Tower of Babel being judged, because they see the smoke of her burning. Okay. And then in Jeremiah 9:11, it says, I will make Jerusalem a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, and I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. So if you make Jerusalem there a prophetic picture of America, it says Jerusalem will be a haunt of jackals. That's a picture of the riders. And then it says, I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. So we see the picture of the destruction of Israel there, and that's connected to 9/11, Jeremiah 9:11. Okay, and then we also see, I think I already talked about this, with the two witnesses that happens in Revelation 11:9. Those from the peoples and tribes and tongues. Okay, so it says when they finish their testimony, so that would be when you got the two peace deals. Okay, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. Okay, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which is called Sodom and Egypt. Okay, so it happens once in America, which could be Egypt, and then it happens once in Israel, which is Sodom. Okay, and then it says Revelation 11. Okay, so then it says, those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nation will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. Okay, so 3.5 days, so like I said, 9/11 is 3.5 days before the 1335th day of Trump's presidency. But it could also connect. Okay, so when you're looking at the fulfillment of these verses for America, that connects to the 3 time frames of judgment on America, but then you have like the half days would connect to the 3 days. Well, the half days, connects to the dividing of time, the time of Messiah, the 5. But basically we're gonna have 3 time frames of judgment in America, and then we're going to be mourning for 3.5 days with Israel, being after Israel gets attacked. And then it says, those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another, because these 2 prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. We see the rioters already doing that in America. We're going to see whoever ends up attacking Israel doing that over there. And then in Revelation 9:11, it talks about they have as king over. Okay, so the locusts have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in the Greek he has the name Apollyon. Okay, I think that's Obama. The angel of the abyss. So the locusts come out of the abyss. Is connected to 9/11, but we see where the locusts, the rioters are connected to Obama, but then we see the beast, the dragon in Revelation 12. You know, um, he goes to attack another group of people. Um, and then, somewhere it says that the other people connected to the dragon go and make war or something like that. So that's Revelation 9:11. Daniel 9:11 says, okay, indeed, all Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, not obeying your voice, so the curse has been poured out on us, along with the oath which is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, for we have sinned against him. Okay, so if it's, so 9:11 kind of talks about, like, Daniel 9:11 talks about the curse, okay? So basically, because America and because Israel has transgressed God's law, um, God has poured out the curse on us. Okay. So that's where we see, 9/11 connects to God's judgment, for transgressing God's law. And basically God says don't divide the land. Okay. Don't mess with Israel because, that's the apple of God's eye. And what is Trump doing? He's messing with Israel. And he's also really messing with America because he's not dealing with the problems here. The rioters are just continuing to do stuff. So like I said, we're out of time. Okay. So we're just waiting for the burning on the other side. I mean, we already see America burning on one side. The rioters are causing burning, the fires in the west are causing burning, and so we're just waiting for Israel to be burning. So that's my update on We Have Got to Be So Close. 9/11, that is Friday. So, definitely be prepared. And then, I have to always put in my, if it doesn't happen, what happens? I could be wrong. I guess I'll be really, 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 really surprised. Except that, like I said, it could, I don't know if things would wait all the way until November 9th, but that's a possibility because we've already seen that with Kristallnacht that happened on 11/9. Um, I haven't done the numbers to see, what happens with 11/9. But we're also seeing, Rosh Hashanah, the actual 7th Jewish month is coming up on September 19th. And then September, Yom Kippur is September 28th, and then the Feast of Booths happened on October 3rd or something like that. So then that's definitely a possibility. So I got to throw that out there just in case I'm wrong. So, because, it's happened many, 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 many other times. I get too anxious and think it's going to happen sooner. But it's hard when all the numbers like match and all the pictures match and everything. But I wanted to get this information out to you so you could be praying about it. You could be possibly prepared of something maybe happening on Friday. Does it feel like we're close? It does to me. So I'll actually be kind of surprised if things go on longer. Because I'm not even really sure people like, it's such a difficult time, and like God says, he shortens the days, and so far I haven't seen much shortening. It just seems like the days have just gone on and on and on. So, anyways, but hang in there because, when Jesus comes, it'd be like we're dreaming, it just, the trials that we're under, he's gonna, oh, the song Beauty from Ashes, I think that comes out of a psalm or one of the prophets. He brings beauty from ashes. So when we see, basically like our lives burning around us, remember that. The whole point of, if we're not in the miry clay, if we're not in the pit, then we don't need a Messiah to come and save us from the pit. So be aware that we're going to be in the pit when the Messiah shows up, and so if you're trying to understand what's going on in the world, it's because, God is allowing darkness to fall because he wants Jesus's light to just shine so bright that people can't deny it, so, and he wants to bring beauty from ashes because God is all about the resurrection. um so hang in there. I know it's hard, I know it's crazy. Take care of yourself, try to get some sleep. I know it's hard. But just look up, for your redemption draws nigh. Read the Psalms. It's a great way to lament. It's a great way to pray out to God. Um, so hang on. Your redemption draws nigh. Jesus is at the door. He's at the door. He's so near. Um, thanks for listening to my videos. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I pray that you are blessed. Um, you know, so so remember, in the darkness, the light's gonna come. Because, okay, so remember, on the first day, darkness was over the deep, and then God said, let there be light. Okay, so that's a picture of the 7 days of Jesus being here. Okay, the 7 days of creation. So hang in there. Okay, so thanks for listening. I appreciate you, and God bless.